This is not about me, this is about we. I am running, first of all, to secure our elected franchise, which has been corrupted by the current secretary and by many other forces. This is the foundation for your freedom. Our Constitution came to us by an elected franchise, and it guaranteed that Constitution guaranteed us certain rights. These rights don't come from the Constitution, the Constitution just affirms them. Our rights do not come from the government, they do not come from the Constitution, they come from God. Agreed? And so, this Constitution is supposed to protect our rights. And this Constitution came to us through an elected franchise, and we continue to secure our elected franchise by using it. We secure our rights by using this elected franchise, right? Of course, an elected franchise that is not completely transparent is not an elected franchise. It is charade, designed to make you think you have a voice, designed to make you think you have government of by and for the people, designed to make you think you have consent of the government when you have none of the above. And that's what our elected franchise then has been reduced to by the use of these black box machines, by means of dirty voter registration rolls, by means of early, unsupervised, no chain of custody, mail-in, and drop box voting. All of these things are corrupting our elections. The day I get elected, I will walk in, find that contract with that private profit-driven company called ES&S that has been corrupting our elections for decades, and tear it up, and we will ship the machines out either to the dumpster or to that big long warehouse you see in one of the Indiana Jones movies, or we will just ship it back to ES&S and say thank you, no thank you. So, a little about myself. As my friend here said, I was born in Albion. Spent a few years in my younger life in Partington, Nebraska, where my dad went to Cedar County News. And then he moved us to Lincoln, and that's pretty much where I was raised. I am hello?
You got it.
1, 2.
I tried to trust him. There you are.
I turned it off over there. Can everybody hear me in the back? Testing 1, 2, testing. Is that better? I'm sorry.
It could be louder.
Louder. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Testing. Okay, great. Very sorry. All right, so I'm the oldest of 7 kids in a lower middle class family. I was never given anything. Do I have to stay away from that? Yes. So, me and my 4 brothers and 2 sisters, we had to work for everything we ever wanted. My parents didn't have anything to give us. My dad worked very hard. My mom had 7 kids by the time she was 31, so she had her hands full. But we love each other to this day. Me and my parents are gone, but me and my siblings, we all love each other. I have 6 kids of my own, and I spent most of my adult life, career-wise, working for Lincoln Fire and Rescue. I retired in August of 2019. And when the pandemic narrative rolled around a few months later, I knew what this was all about. And this was about trampling on your rights. See, I raised all my 6 kids. I'm a big natural health enthusiast and a fitness enthusiast, okay? So I've studied and worked real hard to understand what health is all about, where it comes from. So I raised my 6 kids without doctors, literally, without pharmaceuticals and without vaccines. Some of you may disagree with that. So when I say without doctors, okay, one of my boys broke his wrist, so we got a cast there. And that was one of the 3 boys that we gave birth to at home. I delivered one of my kids in the hospital because the doctor was nowhere to be found when my wife was waiting to deliver, so I just delivered. So that was our last time we were going to waste any money on the hospital. So 6 great kids, all grown out of graduated from university last year, and is doing very well. Got married the month after he graduated from university, and then he had a great job waiting for him at the Garmin Corporation down in Olathe. Him and his wife both love God, and I couldn't be happier. Couldn't be happier with all my kids. So I knew, and so we raised them without doctors, and it was very easy. You just feed them right. You know, you stay. My overarching worldview is God, is Christianity, God and the Bible. So you eat what comes natural, you minimize processing, and you know it's easy to stay healthy. So when the narrative came around, and I've been studying, virus, I've been reading about viruses for 40 years. Okay? So when it came around, I knew it was all about stealing an election, and it was about trampling on your rights and destroying the last bastion of freedom that this world has. Would you agree? Yes. If they take us down, the world is pretty well done. So I began working night and day, full-time at my own expense, nobody else's expense, trying to hold government accountable. So I filed Nebraska's version of FOIA requests. Everybody knows what the Freedom of Information Act request is. Judicial Watch is famous for them. Nebraska's version is the public records request. So I public records requested the local health director in Lincoln. I public records requested the state medical director. I public records requested the governor. Give me your science for the pandemic. And I didn't just ask for it. I delineated, I articulated exactly what that science would look like. The scientific method is very logical. All you have to do is think through it. It's very simple. Most people forget the part about you have to have a separate control experiment. You got your experiment to prove that you got a novel deadly contagion. Well, you got to have a control experiment to prove that the way you're conducting the experiment is not actually causing the problem. Okay. Anyway, my wife and I traveled quite a bit beginning in June of 2020. So this was right after the pandemic started. We went to Florida, Texas, and Colorado, and South Dakota, and Michigan, and quite a few, Missouri. And we didn't bow to any of the mandates. We didn't bow to any, and everywhere we went, we immersed ourselves in the local communities, and with fellow patriots like you, we didn't have a problem anywhere we went. Attended a few truck rallies, so we're surrounded by literally tens of thousands of people. So anyway, I filed this public records request, and guess what I got?
Nothing.
0. We had no written response to your request. They were all simply buying a narrative. What they said is, go check the CDC. Well, you and I both know how corrupt they are. They are simply a revolving door for big pharma.
Yes.
And the World Economic Forum and the mega oligarchs, the mega tech people, they're using this big pharma as the means to take us down.
Yes.
And, shut our businesses down. I have friends who told me to shut their businesses down. You can't go to church. You have to wear a face diaper. I didn't bow to any of that. And neither did my wife, neither did my wife. So, and so as I was working very hard these last 2 years to hold government accountable, I was taking what I was learning from these requests, what I did get, what I didn't get, and sharing them with my fellow citizens. I wanted to educate them. I wanted to embolden them to stand and defy the tyranny just like I was. And I railed on the county mayor we have in Lincoln. She is a communist. And I would do everything I could on social media to rail on her, and the health director, and so I'm writing on a regular basis, and then the election fraud took place, and Trump, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you all realize it, Trump did us the biggest favor. This is why we're all here, this is why we're all awake. They've been stealing our elections for a long time. But he worked his butt off so hard going into 2020, going to a different rally in a different state, 3, 4, maybe 5 times a day, I'm not sure, but he was working his butt off. And, the swing states. What are swing states? They are states where you got a pretty even number of Democrats and Republicans, right? He garnered so much support from the swing states that they had to stop the elections in the middle of the night and start hauling in truckloads of ballots.
That's right.
So, they thought they were only going to have to cheat a little bit after, Democrats. We only have to add a few ballots or a few extra votes to overrun the Republicans. Well, no, they found out Trump had way more support across the board than anybody ever imagined. Well, anybody paying attention would have imagined. So he did us a huge favor by exposing the corruption in our election system. And that's not just in the swing states. I've been to Pennsylvania. I attended a wonderful election integrity conference up there a few weeks ago in Gettysburg, which is so symbolic. The great Senator Doug Mastriano up there is running for governor on election integrity. He conducted the conference. I no sooner walked into this big room, I was there early, turned around, there I'm faced with this great senator, shook his hand and said, I'm Robert Moore, I'm from Nebraska, running for Secretary of State. And this man heard nothing more and turned around and said, would you like to take my seat on the election integrity panel later on after everybody is done speaking? Now we have Phil Waldron and Seth Keschel and Steve Bannon and Douglas Frank and Mike Lindell all there, and he's asking me to take a seat on the panel with these men. I'm like, I just came here to learn and to just take it all in. He wouldn't let me say no, so I ended up taking that seat with Seth Keschel on my right and Mike Lindell on my left. But I ended up turning it around on him. I talked to one of his security detail somewhere at some point in the afternoon, asking, say, hey, this isn't right, this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to turn this back around with the senator and give him his rightful seat back. And so I interrupted the floor at the beginning. I said, ladies and gentlemen, I met this wonderful man this morning, earlier today, and shook his hand, and he gave me this seat when really he didn't even know me. This is how gracious this man was. His integrity, his person was so overwhelming. It's hard to put into words. I said, that great man is your next governor, and he was sitting right there. And so they gave him a standing ovation, and I said, you have to come up and take this seat. No, I said, So, but anyway, I say that to say this. I am networking with our nation's thought leaders on the issue of election integrity. Connections with Nevada and Arizona while I was there, and Michigan. So we are going to fix this problem. We have to fix this problem. So as I'm writing to my fellow citizens, I continue to file public records requests through the pandemic narrative into the election, and I'm exposing all the nonsense about the election. And one of the big things that I found is that I thought that the media was just engaged in this propaganda campaign. November 3rd was the most secure election in U.S. history. I thought that was just the media, something the media got together and decided to do. No, this is an official government propaganda campaign. And it's propaganda, and what's propaganda? It's lies told over and over and over, right? It's a propaganda campaign when the first sentence in this is right on the government page. November 3rd was the most secure election in U.S. history. And the very next sentence, and it's only a two-sentence paragraph, we are still verifying results. And that is written less than 10 days after the election. They are trying to cover their butts big time. So anyway, just a little diversion here quick. While I was up in Pennsylvania, I was speaking with those thought leaders up there and asking them who they thought was going to be certified their election first. And they think it's really going to be Wisconsin. Wisconsin has the best investigation going with a former Supreme Court justice who was assigned to the task. They started out here with the propaganda narrative, most secure election in U.S. history right here in Wisconsin. And then they went, well, maybe there was some mishandling, well, maybe there was some fraud. Now there's, I guess there was massive fraud. Green Bay had all ES&S machines, the same machines we have in the state, and they were all connected to the internet. You cannot believe anything the current incumbent secretary says. He will say, we don't have any fraud in Nebraska. We'll prove it. Prove it. Here's the key question. I want somebody to tell me which founding father it was that said this phrase, quote unquote, you should trust your government. Our entire form of government is based on you don't trust the government, right? Separation of powers, checks and balances at every level. I love a quote from Abraham Lincoln I just caught recently, and I memorized it. It goes like this. No man is good enough to govern another man without his consent.
Right.
But we had this commie mayor, we still have this commie mayor in Lincoln, Nebraska, who was telling everybody else how they had to live their lives. She didn't really think this, but she wanted us to believe she did. That she thought that she was capable of running our lives better than we were. What utter nonsense. What total BS. So I was doing everything I could to get my fellow citizens to stand up. And there were a lot of us Lincolnites who said no, and we weren't going to buy into any of it. And we'd go shopping, and we would still have church, and we would still get together and live normal lives. All right, so now we're moving into the why I'm in this race. Why me, Lord? Why me? Well, I've done all this writing, I've done all this educating my fellow citizens, and election season is drawing close, and I started getting requests because these letters, people liked what I was writing, and they started turning around and saying, they thought I'd be a good candidate, so they started asking me to run for secretary. And I said no. And they kept asking, and I kept saying no. And they kept asking, and I kept saying no. And they kept asking, and finally I decided, okay, maybe I should pray about it. Never had any intentions, never had any desire, never had any plans. So I prayed about it, and I didn't hear anything. So I prayed and fasted about it. And I'm not talking about fasting to me, I'm talking about praying and fasting for a couple of days. I still didn't hear anything. Maybe I'm just dull, I don't know. I know how to open myself up to God. I'm really wanting to, I don't want to do this unless God is in it. I don't want to do it, this is not self-ambition. So, the praying and fasting wasn't, too far before the end of before the filing deadline. So I'm literally sitting on my couch on the last afternoon that you can file. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the deadline is 5 o'clock. And a dear, precious, God-fearing woman, older woman from Omaha calls me up and says, Bob, I'm not going to apologize for this call. We have been trying to fill races with conservative candidates over and over and over. And it wasn't, and they were all reluctant, but once they prayed this prayer, They finally said yes. Can you hear me in the back okay? So I said, Shar, what was that prayer? Oh, my Father, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, your will, not mine, be done. Well, when she uttered that prayer, every time I recount what happened, it still breaks me down. When she uttered that prayer, I knew that God was calling me. And who was I to deny this, my service to my God, my country, and to my fellow man? So I got off the couch, I showered, I dressed, I got in the car, I started down Highway 2 because I live in Southeast Lincoln, and I drove past the penitentiary. About that time, I said, I need to call my friend Jerry and ask him what he thinks of this. I'm so a little waffly, Jerry, I'm headed downtown to file for secretary. What do you think about this? And he was real quiet to answer. You could tell he was thinking, or slow to answer. He was thinking, and finally came back and said, Bob, you and I are both retired. We don't want to leave anything on the table. Kind of the end of the declaration. We pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. So here I am. Look, running for you. So, about the service. Here's my little stump speech. I like to reference the Declaration and the Nebraska Constitution. So, all men are created equal. Not some, all men are created equal. Let's get that out of the way first. Created. We are created in God's image. We are not evolved. We are created in God's image.
Right.
All right? And all men are created equal. Not some men are created to be serfs and servants, and others are created to be oligarchs and lords and kings, right? We are all created equal. You have no more right to run my life than I have to run your life. All men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And governments are instituted among men to secure our rights, not to take them away, to secure them. Now then, these same ideals are reflected in our own Nebraska State Constitution, where it says, we are by nature free and independent people, and it enumerates the same rights: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the right to self-defense. Right to life doesn't mean much if you don't have the right to defend it. So life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, right to self-defense. And then it says, these rights shall not be denied or infringed by the state or any subdivision thereof. What? The mayor took an oath. All these politicians, every member of the legislature, every member of the judicial branch, every member of the executive branch took this oath to support this Constitution and to defend your rights. And not one of them stood up when your rights were being infringed and came to your defense, used their bully pulpit, and called down that commie mayor over there in Lincoln, Nebraska, and said, sit down and shut up, you communists. You're infringing on the rights of my fellow Americans, and I'm not going to let you do it. And we're going to stand up, and we're going to defy you, and we're going to stand shoulder to shoulder. I'm sorry I get worked up because I love my fellow man. The way Christ tells me to love him, the way I love myself. I was pissed because my friends were told they couldn't earn a living anymore. And, look at the school board. School boards are tyrannizing their kids. This is just criminality to the max. It's just criminality to the max. So, all right, so the current secretary took that oath. Not only did he not look out for your rights, not only did he use his bully pulpit to come to your defense, he literally used the pandemic narrative to undermine your rights. because he used the pandemic narrative to do exactly what the Obama, Clinton, and Biden regime wanted him to do with it. He used it as an excuse, making it too loud, to sign off on mass unsupervised voting. Mail-in, drop box, all unsupervised voting. Moreover, he was sleeping at the wheel when Mark Zuckerberg showed up to Lancaster County and offered him $404,000 so he could corrupt our Lancaster County election, which, as you know, Lincoln, Douglas, and Sarpy, I mean, they have a huge effect on the rest of the state. I'm sure you don't appreciate what kind of effect that is. So those are the three biggest counties, and those are the three biggest areas of corruption. But we've got everywhere the machine is, we've got corruption. So let me just say this: our election system right now is broke, but it's not so broke that we can't overrun it. And there are checks and balances still left. If we get on our canvassing boards and say you can't certify that election as long as you don't have transparency in your election, and as long as you have that machine, you don't have transparency. If you could muscle those, persuade them to not certify, we would be making a huge statement. The other thing that we can do, and this is how I learned recently, this young kid out of Virginia who, big surprise to win, he had watchers everywhere, poll watchers, tabulation watchers, drop box watchers. He had an army of people watching. So now if you've got watchers everywhere, the cheaters are, you've got this 2,000 Mules coming out soon with Dinesh D'Souza, how they were stuffing all these boxes, they were $10. So they take a picture, so I get my $100, $10 for every fake ballot I stick in these boxes. So if we get people watching, we can put them in check. You, the people, we the people, I'm on your side. We are the ultimate check and balance, and we have to stand up. We have to take our elections back. We don't take our elections back this way. I mean, if we don't take our country back by fixing our elections, there's only one alternative left, and we all know what that is, right? That is lock and load. And we don't really want that. I mean, if it comes to that, we're going to do what we have to do, but we don't really want that. And I don't think it's going to need to come to that. I think God is on our side. I think when the founders appealed to the God of the universe for the rectitude of their intentions, they were godly men who were looking for a free country where people could freely serve God. This is ultimately about God. You're getting him on it. So I'm, again, running on a platform of election integrity. And if you want me to go into the weeds on that, we can do a little Q&A time, but it's pretty simple. And then I will use the bully pulpit like nobody has ever seen. I will search out fraud, corruption, and tyranny at every level of local and state government. I will shout it from the housetops, and I will hold them accountable, and I will let you know what's going on so that we can stand together and fight this corruption. And they'll quickly run like rats as we shed light on everything. They'll quickly, I don't know where they'll go, but they're not going to stay around. Yeah. How long have I been going? Questions? Okay. Patrick back there with my shirt on. He's one of the directors of the Nebraska Freedom Coalition. He looks like a simple guy right there, but this is a very sharp, articulate young man, and I couldn't be more privileged to have him as a friend, as with all of you. So, anybody have any questions they want to ask?